Hi guys, how old are you? I'd love to see the age range of our viewers. Write your age below.
I remember the exact moment it happened. Not because it was loud or chaotic, but because it was so quiet. The kind of silence that takes over a room in slow motion, like a soft inhale before something breaks. I was standing in the middle of my bridal shower, surrounded by pastel balloons, finger sandwiches, and polite Instagram-filtered laughter, when the door creaked open and in walked my sister Abby, wearing white. Not cream, not beige, not bridal off-white. I mean white. Silky, fitted, floor-length white with lace on the sleeves and a goddamn slit up the side like she was walking a red carpet. I saw heads turn before I even saw her face. The air shifted like someone had turned down the heat. A couple of my friends exchanged those quick glances that say, "Is this real life?" My maid of honor, Dana, actually choked on her mimosa. I swear to God I could feel the collective tension settle on my shoulders, like someone had just placed a brick in my arms. Abby smiled like she didn't notice. Hell, maybe she didn't. Or maybe she absolutely did. She walked in like it was her shower, not mine, arms wide, calling out, "Oh my God, look at the bride-to-be." Her tone was syrupy sweet, but I saw the flicker in her eyes. Just a flash of triumph. She wanted eyes on her, and she got exactly that. I didn't say anything, not right away. What could I say? Call her out in front of everyone? Demand she go home and change like a petulant child? I stood there smiling that plastic smile women get taught when they're little. Smile and don't make things worse. Keep the peace. Be gracious, even when you're boiling inside. My cheeks hurt from holding it. My mother laughed first. Of course she did. "Abby, you look stunning," she said, as if she couldn't see what Abby was doing. As if she hadn't spent the last 30 years pretending her older daughter didn't have a mean streak, sharp enough to slice skin. Abby waved off the attention like it was nothing, then looked straight at me and said, "Relax, it's just a joke. I mean, it's your day." A joke, sure. The same way she made a joke at my engagement dinner about my fiance being shockingly handsome for someone who works in IT. The same way she joked in college when she signed me up for a Tinder profile without my permission, just to see if anyone would swipe right on you. Abby's jokes always came wrapped in sugar, but with a knife tucked in the bow. Everyone laughed, nervously, even Dana, who leaned over and whispered, "I will personally set that dress on fire if you want." But still, she laughed too. That's the thing about people like Abby. They know how to twist situations just enough so that if you react, you're the one ruining the mood. You're the killjoy, the drama queen. So I didn't react. I sat down, accepted my gifts, drank my champagne, and pretended my own sister hadn't tried to steal. The spotlight out from under me again, but something shifted inside me that afternoon. Something snapped. Maybe it was the way my mother looked so proud of her. Maybe it was the way everyone let it happen, like they were all used to it, like they expected it, like Abby being the center of attention was some law of nature we were all too tired to fight. Or maybe it was just the timing. I'd spent my whole life letting her win. But this time, I had the leverage. I had something she didn't know I had, and I'd been sitting on it for years, not because I was afraid to use it, but because I was still playing by the old rules. Be the good sister, don't stoop to her level, keep the peace. But you know what peace feels like when it's one-sided? Like slow suicide. That night, after the last of the guests had left, and I was alone in my apartment with 3 leftover cupcakes and a deflated balloon floating near the ceiling, I opened a folder on my laptop I hadn't looked at in a long time. It was labeled College Backup. The kind of folder you keep meaning to delete but never do, because it's tied to an older version of yourself you're not ready to erase. Inside, among photos of roommates and bad haircuts and scanned copies of syllabi I'd never need again, was a subfolder called Spring Break 2014. I clicked it. Abby's face stared back at me from half a dozen photos. Beer in one hand, cigarette in the other, flushed and laughing and draped all over someone who very much was not her fiancé. I stared at the image, zoomed in, adjusted the lighting. My heart wasn't racing, my palms weren't sweaty. I didn't feel cruel, I felt calm, focused. It was like picking up a scalpel after years of being handed a spoon. I knew exactly what this was. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to confront. I was going to let the picture speak for itself. And the beauty of it? I didn't have to do anything obvious. I just had to share something that already existed. No commentary, no accusation, just a quiet little reminder of the truth. And so I smiled to myself in the flickering light of my laptop screen, sipping flat champagne and watching that photo load in full. Abby thought she'd won that afternoon, thought she'd gotten away with it again. But the game had just started, and this time, I wasn't playing by her rules anymore. People like to say that sisters are forever, that no one knows you better, that the bond is unbreakable because it's born in the same house, built on the same memories, and woven through every season of your life, whether you want it or not. But no one talks about what happens when that bond starts to rot from the inside, when what should have been closeness turns into quiet resentment, and love becomes something sticky and tangled and hard to name without guilt attached to every syllable. Abby and I were close once, or maybe I just thought we were. Childhood has a way of smudging the truth with soft colors and fuzzy borders, like a bad photo filter that makes everything look more innocent than it really was. We shared a room until she left for college, and I can still remember the way her perfume clung to the curtains, how she'd hum the same pop songs every morning while getting ready, how her laughter could fill up a room and silence every other voice. Our parents adored her. Not just loved, adored, like she was some kind of celestial event they'd been blessed to witness. Every honor roll, every cheerleading trophy, every time a boy brought her flowers or a teacher wrote home to praise her, it was like they lit another candle at her altar. Me? I was quieter. Not shy exactly, just always aware that I wasn't built to compete in the same arena. I learned to read early, wrote angsty poems in journals I never let anyone see, got straight A's without anyone asking me to. My teachers called me responsible. My mom called me our calm one, which was just another way of saying I didn't demand attention the way Abby did. I wasn't jealous of her, not at first. I just assumed everyone had a golden child in their family, and I'd simply been born next to mine. But over time, it became harder to ignore the ways Abby's spotlight came at my expense. At school, I was Abby's little sister. At home, I was the one who got compared. Even our milestones weren't really mine. When I turned 16, Abby announced at my birthday dinner that she'd just been invited to a national dance competition. When I got accepted into college, my mom congratulated me, then added, "You should really talk to Abby about how to make friends quickly. You don't want to be lonely up there." My victories were footnotes in her story. I didn't even realize how much that weighed on me until much later. College was when things shifted. Not because she changed, but because I started seeing her without the childhood filter. We both went to the same university, different majors, different friend groups. I was in the library, she was at parties. I was navigating internships, she was navigating boyfriends. And one night, I saw her, drunk on a stranger's couch, flirting with a guy who clearly wasn't her current boyfriend at the time, laughing too loud, sipping something pink and strong. I didn't judge her, I wasn't that kind of sister. But I watched her throw her arm around the guy's neck, lean in close, and whisper something into his ear. She caught my eye across the room and smirked. Not embarrassed, not surprised, just smirking like she knew exactly what I'd seen and didn't care. Later that year, she got pregnant. It wasn't common knowledge. She came to me in tears, shaking, terrified. I remember the way she collapsed onto my dorm bed, clutching her phone like it was a life raft. She hadn't told our parents. She couldn't. Not Abby, not the perfect daughter. I was the only one she trusted. And so I drove her to the clinic, sat with her in silence while she filled out the forms, held her hand while she cried in the recovery room, and swore on everything I had that I'd never tell a soul. I didn't, not then, not even years later when she was engaged and standing in front of our family, glowing like a damn lighthouse. I kept that secret because that's what I'd always done. Protected her, even when she didn't deserve it. But protection turned into something heavier as the years went by. After college, Abby got a job at a luxury interior design firm. She called me to brag about clients who spent more on rugs than I made in a year. I was working in public education, living paycheck to paycheck, still chipping away at student loans. She posted selfies in Italy. I posted lesson plans. And every family dinner felt like a performance, one where I played the humble sister and she played the star, and everyone clapped accordingly. The thing about long-standing resentment is that it doesn't explode. It drips, slowly, over time, one drop at a time, like a leaky faucet in the middle of the night. You can ignore it for a while, but eventually it keeps you up. That bridal shower, Abby in that white dress, everyone laughing while I stood there swallowing humiliation like it was sparkling wine. That wasn't the beginning. It was just the final drop. When I found that folder on my laptop the night after the shower, I didn't feel like I was about to destroy something. I felt like I was finally being honest. Like I was holding up a mirror and saying, "Here, this is you. This is what you've always been. I've just been too polite to show you before." Abby wasn't the villain in some cartoon. She was more dangerous than that. She was the kind of woman who dressed her cruelty in compliments, who wrapped insults in charm, who did whatever she wanted and called it just a joke when people flinched. But not this time. I wasn't going to flinch. Not anymore. I went to bed that night not with fire in my chest, but with clarity. I knew the storm was coming, and I wasn't scared. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't playing the supporting role in her drama. I was writing a new story, one where I finally said enough. And the best part? I knew she'd never see it coming, because girls like Abby never expect the quiet ones to fight back. The morning after the shower, the sun came through the blinds with that kind of harsh, unforgiving brightness that feels almost mocking when your head is still cloudy from cheap champagne and forced smiles. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold before I even thought to sip it, scrolling absently through the tagged photos from the night before. I saw myself smiling in every one, my mouth doing the work of joy while my eyes gave nothing away. The algorithm, of course, had already begun its work, shoving images into my feed of bridal shower decorations, sisterhood quotes, and white dresses that looked hauntingly familiar. That's when the message came in. Abby, bright and early, as if nothing had happened. "Hope you're not still salty, love you." Just like that. A text message that reeked of smugness, carelessly disguised as affection. I stared at it for a long time, letting the words burrow into my skin like they always did. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, not even a moment of reflection. Just Abby doing what she always did, dismissing her own cruelty as comedy and expecting the world to nod along. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because I had already decided the night before that I wasn't going to let this be another scene in the long-running sitcom of Abby does what she wants and Lena deals with it. I opened that old folder again, Spring Break 2010, and there it was, just as I remembered. The photo wasn't scandalous in the tabloid sense, but it was enough. Abby on some guy's lap, red Solo cup in one hand, his hand visibly under her short dress, her head thrown back in laughter. I could practically hear the blaring music from the frat house, smell the stale beer soaked into the carpet. What made the image potent wasn't just the content, it was the timing. The photo was time-stamped April 5th, 2014, exactly 4 months before she and David had their first date, at least according to the fairy tale version she had fed the family. She'd always told us their love story started cleanly, wrapped in romance and timing, but I remembered that semester all too well. I remembered Abby bouncing from one guy to another, drunk on attention more than alcohol, testing limits and rewriting history with the ease of someone who had never once been held accountable. I opened a photo editor. I didn't touch much, just brightened the lighting a little, cropped out the other partygoers, sharpened her face and the guy's hand under her dress. I didn't want it to look staged or vengeful. I wanted it to look real, because it was, every pixel of it. Then I opened Instagram and selected close friends, a curated list, handpicked for maximum ripple effect. David wasn't on it, of course. I wasn't foolish enough to send it directly to him. but I knew people who were close to him who'd be sure to show him. That's the thing about secrets. They don't need to be shouted from rooftops to cause destruction. Sometimes all it takes is a whisper in the right room. I posted the photo with a single nonchalant caption. Throwback, can't believe how fast time flies. No tags, no names, just a casual dagger dropped onto the internet like a breadcrumb no one was supposed to notice. But everyone would. My phone buzzed almost immediately. People viewed it within seconds. A few replied with laughing emojis, probably thinking it was a harmless blast from the past. But I wasn't watching them. I was watching the names that lingered. The people who opened the story and then didn't react. The ones who saw and knew. 3 hours later, my phone vibrated again. Abby, this time not laughing. What the hell did you do? All caps, no smiley face, no jokes. Just raw panic typed through what I imagined were trembling fingers. I didn't reply. Instead, I took another slow sip of my now lukewarm coffee, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It wasn't even revenge. It was clarity. Cold, precise, and overdue. Abby had always relied on the same playbook. Be charming, be loud, be funny, and when that fails, flip the script, become the victim. She was probably pacing her apartment now, phone in hand, cycling through scenarios. Had I meant to expose her? Was it accidental? Could she spin it before David saw? Could she delete it from someone's phone? Could she blame it on someone else? But what she couldn't do, what she had never prepared for, was face herself, unfiltered, unforgiven, unexplained. The silence that followed was louder than anything she could have said. No follow-up message, no phone call, just digital dead air. And I knew, without checking, that the dominoes were already falling, because David was not stupid. He was many things, reserved, meticulous, even a little cold, but he was not a fool. If he had seen the post, he would have questions. And Abby? She'd have answers, just not the kind she wanted to give. That afternoon, I went out for a walk. The air was sharp, spring fighting its way through the last dregs of winter. I didn't take my phone. I didn't need to. Whatever was coming next had already been set in motion, and for once in my life, I wasn't waiting to be blindsided. I had made a move, a deliberate one, not out of spite, but out of necessity, because sometimes the only way to cleanse a wound is to expose it to the air. Let it sting, let it bleed, let it heal. When I got home, I checked my notifications. Over 50 people had viewed the story, some twice. The post had expired, but the damage didn't need 24 hours. Abby hadn't messaged again, but David had. Just one word, sent at 4:23 p.m. Why? I didn't answer him either. Not yet. Because some truths don't need explanations. They just need to be seen. By the time the sun began to set that evening, casting long shadows across my kitchen tiles and painting my walls with a burnt orange that felt entirely too peaceful. Given the chaos that was unfolding, my phone had become a live wire. It buzzed like it was trying to crawl away from me, each vibration sharper than the last. A dull pulse of digital anxiety begging for attention. I watched it, sitting in the middle of my table like a bomb, daring me to pick it up. I didn't, not at first. I let it sit there while I cleaned up the leftover mess from the night before, folding napkins I'd never reuse, tossing half-empty favor bags, wiping down a wine ring from the counter like I was washing away some ghost of forced celebration. It wasn't until I heard the chime that signified a voicemail that I finally gave in. I played the message without holding the phone to my ear, letting the speaker spit his voice into the room like a shot across the bow. David's voice was calm, too calm, like someone trying not to lose control. Hey, Lena, I need to know if that photo is real. From your story, the one with Abby. Please don't play games. I'm asking you directly. Is it real? No hi. No how are you. No polite pretense. Just the question, hard and cold and immediate. He'd seen it. Someone had shown him. Probably one of his friends or someone mutual from that cursed close friends list. I didn't reply right away. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, letting the weight of his words settle in my chest like sediment. I could have answered in a dozen ways. I could have said yes. I could have said it's complicated. I could have said none of your business, but I didn't. I did nothing because sometimes silence is more powerful than any admission. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Abby, her name flashing across the screen with the kind of urgency you only see when someone is on the edge of losing control. I let it go to voicemail too. I was busy. Not with anything specific, just with not responding. That's a kind of power most people don't talk about, the refusal to engage. I was done playing audience to her act. But she didn't give up. A text came through next, long and frantic. I cannot believe you would stoop this low. What is your problem? Are you seriously trying to ruin my life because of a dress? That photo is ancient, you know that. We weren't even official. David knows that. I've told him, but of course you had to be petty. You've always been jealous of me. You're sick. Jealous. That word clung to my skin like something rotten. It's always jealousy when a woman stops tolerating another woman's manipulation. It's always, you're just jealous when someone finally holds up a mirror. The irony, of course, was that I never wanted what Abby had. I never wanted her attention, her spotlight, her exhausting web of lies. What I wanted, what I had always wanted, was peace. And she had never let me have it. Another message followed a minute later. You need to delete it now. This isn't funny anymore. You're messing with people's lives. And finally, the last one, stripped of all the fake sweetness, just raw and bitter. If he leaves me, it's on you. I stared at that message for a long time, rereading it like it was written in a language I was trying to learn. It was so perfectly Abby, not an apology, not even an attempt to understand, just blame redirected with surgical precision. She was always the victim in her own stories, no matter how much wreckage she left behind. She was never the one at fault. The rules didn't apply to her. Eventually, I did answer someone. Not David, not Abby. I called Dana. I needed a voice of reason that wasn't soaked in family politics or passive-aggressive guilt. When she picked up, I didn't say hello. I just asked, "Do you think I went too far?" She was quiet for a beat. Then, in that steady voice of hers, the one that had gotten me through breakups and breakdowns, she said, "I think you finally stood up for yourself. And sometimes, when you've been quiet too long, the truth sounds loud. That doesn't make it wrong." I didn't cry. I thought I might. But instead I felt something else. Relief, maybe, or something close to it. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and only just remembered how to exhale. Later that night, I saw David had sent another message. This time, he wasn't asking questions. He was making a statement. I confronted her. She lied. Then she cried. Then she told me you're unstable. I don't know what to believe anymore. That was the moment it really hit me. Abby hadn't just tried to protect herself. She tried to sacrifice me to do it. She turned on me without hesitation, flipping the narrative in a heartbeat. I wasn't surprised. I was, however, done pretending she wasn't capable of it. I didn't reply to him either. What could I say? That I'd known this would happen? That I'd planned for it? That I wasn't sorry? Because I wasn't, not even a little. If he was smart, he'd take the truth for what it was and walk away. If he was weak, he'd forgive her and pretend none of it mattered. Either way, it wasn't my job to protect him. Not anymore. I poured myself a glass of wine, not to celebrate, not to toast my own petty victory, but simply to sit in the quiet and let the storm rage outside of me for once. Abby was unraveling. David was questioning everything. The house of cards she'd built was swaying in the wind, and I wasn't the one trying to hold it together. I opened Instagram again. The story had expired, but the views were still visible. The numbers didn't lie. Neither did the silence that followed. Some truths don't require confrontation. Some betrayals don't need loud declarations. Sometimes, the most devastating thing you can do is show people who someone really is, and then walk away while they scramble to explain themselves. And that's exactly what I did. By the next morning, the family group chat had gone from dry and dead silent to absolutely volcanic. The kind of eruption that starts with one sharp message and quickly devolves into a landslide of guilt, accusations, and performative confusion. The kind of digital chaos that only families like mine can conjure, where every statement is a landmine and every question is laced with judgment disguised as concern. I had just stepped out of the shower, towel wrapped around my head, still dripping onto the bathroom mat, when I heard the rapid-fire pinging that told me someone, probably my mother, had finally noticed the rift that was quietly splitting open beneath the pristine facade we always pretended was a family bond. It started with a single sentence from Abby. "Can someone explain why Lena is trying to ruin my relationship?" Just that, no context, no courtesy, just a loaded accusation hurled into a space where she knew I wouldn't be the only one who read it. She was framing the narrative before I could even think about whether I wanted to be part of the conversation. My mom jumped in, her tone already laced with alarm, writing, "What's going on, girls? I don't understand. Abby, what are you talking about?" And then came Abby again, this time with more venom. She posted an old photo to her story, me and some guy, from forever ago. David saw it. Now he won't even look at me. I stood there letting the messages build like a storm, towel unraveling around my shoulders, phone warm in my hand. I wasn't in a hurry to jump into the pit. I'd lived in that pit for most of my life, always the one expected to diffuse the tension, patch the holes, explain myself in gentle tones while my sister burned things to the ground and walked away unscathed. But not this time. I was going to let the fire burn exactly the way she had lit it. More messages followed. A cousin asked if I'd really posted something to shame Abby. My aunt chimed in with a vaguely spiritual quote about forgiveness. Then my mother, again, sounding more desperate now. "Lena, please call me. I don't understand what's happening. Your sister is very upset." That was the moment I realized how deep the programming went. How thoroughly I had been taught to protect Abby at all costs, to absorb every hit with grace, to never let anyone think poorly of her, even when she was the architect of her own downfall. My mother didn't ask what the photo showed. She didn't ask why I'd posted it. She didn't question what Abby might have done to provoke it. Her concern, as always, was focused entirely on the performance of peace and the appearance of unity, not the truth, never the truth. I didn't call. Instead, I sent a simple message to the group chat. "The photo is real. I didn't say anything about it. People can decide what it means for themselves. No rage, no defense, just a plain fact delivered without embellishment." The silence that followed was deafening. No one replied for at least 5 minutes, which in group chat time is an eternity. And then, inevitably, my mother again. "This isn't how sisters treat each other." I stared at that sentence for a long time. I thought about all the ways Abby had treated me over the years. I thought about birthdays hijacked, boyfriends flirted with, secrets weaponized, tears dismissed, and every time she'd said something cruel and wrapped it in a joke like it was a party favor. I thought about that damn white dress, the smug smile, the laughter that had followed at my expense. I thought about being expected to take it, to rise above it, to forgive her again and again until I forgot how to feel anger at all. So I typed back, "Maybe not, but it's how people treat each other when one of them keeps pretending the other doesn't matter." No one responded to that. The chat went still. I imagined Abby throwing her phone across the room, screaming at the screen, trying to find a way to twist it all back into her control. I imagined my mother pacing the kitchen, telling my father that I was acting out, that she didn't recognize me anymore, that something must have happened to make me so bitter. But nothing had happened. That was the thing. This wasn't about a single moment or a single photo. It was about the weight of years, the long, quiet erosion of trust and respect that finally reached its breaking point. That evening, around 7, there was a knock on my door. I opened it and there she was. Abby, mascara smudged under her eyes, hair thrown into a messy bun, wearing a hoodie that looked too clean to be genuinely lived in. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited and stood in the middle of my living room like she was expecting applause, or maybe just mercy. "You need to fix this," she said, her voice cracked but steady. "You need to delete whatever you posted and tell David it was nothing." I didn't move. I just looked at her. For a second, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who climbed into my bed during thunderstorms and begged me to tell her a story. But that girl was long gone. What stood before me now was a woman who'd spent decades getting away with everything and panicking now that someone had finally said no. "I'm not fixing anything," I said. "I didn't create this problem. I just stopped covering for it." She blinked, stunned that I wasn't folding like I always had. "Do you want me to be miserable? Is that it? Are you that twisted?" I shook my head, slowly, deliberately. "I want you to stop pretending your actions don't have consequences. That's all." There was a beat of silence, and then her voice turned colder, sharper. "If David leaves me, I will never forgive you." I felt the weight of that threat, but it didn't land, not this time. I met her eyes and said quietly, "I stopped caring about your forgiveness a long time ago." And with that, she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the apartment, but I didn't flinch. I sat down on the couch, picked up my wine, and turned the TV on without even checking to see what was playing. The damage was done. The cleanup, if there would be any, wasn't mine to manage. Abby's perfect world was cracking, and I wasn't going to be the one to hold up the scaffolding anymore. Let her figure out how to rebuild without a scapegoat. Let her sit in the discomfort she'd spent a lifetime inflicting on others. And if she never forgave me, well, that was finally her problem to live with. It's easy from the outside to look at a situation like this and slap a label on it. Jealousy, revenge, petty sibling drama, maybe even emotional instability if you're feeling particularly judgmental. I've seen enough made-for-TV movies and glossy family therapy articles to know exactly how people try to frame women like me when we finally stop swallowing what's being force-fed to us. But what no one sees, and what no one really wants to see, is the slow, silent grind of being minimized for years. The erosion that happens when you're constantly being asked to be the bigger person, the quieter sister, the one who lets things go for the sake of peace that never truly belonged to you anyway. So if you want to know why I did it, why I posted that photo, why I disrupted the little fantasy Abby had carefully constructed around her life and her relationship and her reputation, it wasn't just about a dress or a party or a text message that poked at an old bruise. It was about the pile of invisible weight I'd been dragging behind me for most of my life and how I finally decided I was done carrying it. The truth is, Abby had always walked through the world like it belonged to her. Like everything and everyone existed to orbit around her drama, her beauty, her charm, and whatever emotional crisis she happened to be manufacturing at the time. People forgave her before she even apologized, partly because she knew how to cry without smearing her mascara, and partly because she had mastered the art of selective vulnerability. She'd pull people in with that trembling voice and wide-eyed sorrow, and just like that, her mistakes would be reframed as accidents. Her manipulations turned into misunderstandings. And because I was her sister, her quieter, more grounded, less radiant counterpart, I was expected to understand, to support, to clean up after her when things got messy, to lie on her behalf when it got serious, and to smile through it all so the rest of the family wouldn't get uncomfortable. I can't even count how many times I've been her shield, like when she wrecked our dad's car senior year and blamed it on faulty brakes, knowing full well she was texting while driving. I kept quiet then, even though I knew she'd swerved because she was trying to take a selfie, or the time she got blackout drunk at my graduation party, threw up in front of my advisor, and then cried so convincingly that I ended up apologizing to her for not warning her how strong the punch was. But the memory that sticks out the most, the one that lives in a quiet, locked place inside me, was the night she knocked on my dorm door with trembling hands, saying the test was positive, and she didn't know what to do. I didn't lecture her. I didn't judge. I drove her 2 hours to the nearest clinic that wouldn't report to our home state, held her hand through every cramp and every tear, paid for the appointment when her card got declined, and lied to our parents about where we'd been all weekend. She never said thank you, not once. She cried on the drive home, then fell asleep with her head against the window, and when she woke up, it was like it never happened. Like the whole thing had been a dream I was supposed to forget. I didn't post the photo to hurt her. Not really. I posted it because I had finally run out of reasons not to. I posted it because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like protecting her anymore. And maybe that makes me vindictive, or cold, or petty. Maybe it makes me exactly the kind of monster she'll now tell people I am. But here's what it really makes me: exhausted and done. That picture, her in that stranger's lap, flushed and careless and wild, wasn't some buried treasure I dug up to destroy her. It was just a relic of a life she had always insisted never existed. She told David she had been loyal, that their story was clean, that he had rescued her from a series of meaningless boys and finally shown her what real love looked like. But that photo told a different story, one she'd carefully edited out of the narrative. And I knew deep down that if someone had done that to me, if my fiancé had lied to me about who he really was, about the things he'd done, about the people he'd been with, and the things they'd meant, I would want to know. I would want someone to tell me, even if it shattered everything, especially then. So maybe it wasn't just about Abby. Maybe it was about David too. Maybe it was about making sure someone didn't sign up for a future that had been built on fiction. I didn't reach out to him directly because I didn't want to be the villain in that story either, the bitter sister lashing out in the name of righteousness. But I gave him a thread, a clue, a way to ask questions she never thought he'd ask. And yes, I knew what it would do. I knew she'd lose control. I knew the people who had always defended her would be thrown into confusion. I knew she'd say I was attacking her, that I was mentally unstable, that I was jealous, vindictive, cruel. And I was ready for that, because the truth is, I'd been accused of worse for doing far less. And if I was going to be dragged through the mud anyway, I wanted to make damn sure it was for something I actually did. I think people assume revenge feels satisfying, that it's some explosive high, like fireworks and applause. But for me, it felt like silence. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 20 years. It felt like setting down a weight I'd forgotten I was even carrying and realizing just how heavy it had been. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel powerful. I felt tired. But I also felt clean, like I'd finally done something that was honest, even if it was ugly. Abby hadn't texted me again since the night she stormed out of my apartment. David hadn't called either. The group chat was dead. The silence from my family was deafening, but I didn't miss their voices. Not in the way I used to. I knew that eventually someone would reach out, probably my mother, with some carefully worded plea for reconciliation, some lecture about how life is short and sisters are all we have. But I wasn't sure I'd pick up this time. I wasn't sure I wanted to. Because here's the part people never understand until they're in it themselves. Sometimes choosing yourself feels like betrayal, but it isn't. It's just the first honest thing you've done in a long, long time. The week before my wedding should have been filled with final fittings, last-minute calls to the florist, obsessing over napkin colors I'd later forget even existed, and maybe even a few moments of joy. Instead, it played out like the last act of a slow-motion disaster, where every hour brought a new tremor, a fresh ripple across the surface of the carefully manufactured calm that was now beyond repair. I wasn't surprised that Abby hadn't reached out again. Not even a text. Not a passive-aggressive Instagram story. Not a meme she could pretend was just a coincidence. The silence between us had solidified into something heavier than anger. It was calcified, permanent, like scar tissue that no longer stung but would always be there, reminding me every time I brushed against it that some things don't heal, they just harden. My mother, as expected, called me 3 days before the wedding. Her voice on the line was thin, brittle, already laced with disappointment before I had even said a word. She didn't waste time. "Lena," she said, drawing out my name like it might crack in her throat. "I know things have been tense, but it's your wedding. This isn't the time to hold grudges. Abby made a mistake. We all do. She's still your sister." I had to press the phone against my ear just to hear her over the buzz of my own thoughts. which were louder and sharper than anything she could say. It was almost impressive, really, how effortlessly she could erase what had happened, reduce it to a simple misstep, as though years of humiliation and betrayal could be chalked up to one unfortunate joke and a poorly timed photo. I listened without interrupting because that's what I'd always done. But this time, when she finished with her soft-spoken plea and that final dagger, family is family, Lena. You don't just cut people out over one thing. I didn't soothe her. I didn't cave. I simply said, that's exactly what Abby's always counted on, that no matter what she does, we'll just fold. There was a pause, the kind that lasts just a second too long, and then she sighed, not because she understood, but because she realized she couldn't change my mind. The wedding went on as planned. It was smaller than I'd originally imagined, stripped of the traditional chaos and pageantry, the guest list quietly edited, the energy calmer, steadier, more mine. Abby wasn't there. Neither were the cousins who had flooded the group chat a week ago with their unsolicited commentary and carefully neutral opinions. It was funny, in a bitter sort of way, how quickly people scattered when they weren't allowed to pretend anymore. But I didn't feel their absence as a loss. I felt it as a breath of fresh air. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. No extravagant floral arch, no dramatic music. Just me and the man who had stood beside me while my life cracked open and reformed into something sharper and more honest. He hadn't asked questions I couldn't answer. He hadn't demanded that I fix things. He had simply stood still and let me lean against something solid for the first time in years. At the reception, after the toasts and the dancing and the gentle clinking of glasses, I stepped outside onto the balcony just to feel the night air on my face. The sky above was wide and deep and indifferent, which felt oddly comforting. My phone buzzed in my hand, and for a brief moment I considered ignoring it. But something made me look. It was Abby, a single message. You won, happy? No punctuation, no emotion, just that, flat, bitter, and as transparent as she'd ever been. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I typed out a dozen replies in my head. I imagined saying something cruel, something cathartic, something final. But the truth was, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like someone who had finally stepped out of a long, dark room into the light, blinking and sore and a little unsure of what came next. I didn't want to fight anymore, but I also didn't want to pretend. So I did what felt right. I deleted the message, not out of forgiveness, not as a peace offering, but because I didn't need her permission to feel free. Inside, someone called my name, laughter rising from the dance floor, champagne glasses catching the light. I slipped my phone into my bag, left the balcony behind, and walked back into the party without a backward glance. There was no dramatic confrontation, no teary reconciliation, no final scene where we embraced and whispered apologies into each other's hair. There was just absence and relief. Some people will say I was cruel, that I should have let it go, that weddings are for unity, not division, that family is sacred and sisters should stick together no matter what. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. The truth is, I don't owe anyone an answer. I lived that story, I carried it, I bore the weight of it long enough to know exactly what it cost me. And now, I'm done carrying things that don't belong to me. People love to say that blood is thicker than water, as if that's a reason to hold on to relationships that leave you bruised and breathless. But I've learned something they never include in that phrase. Blood may bind you, but it doesn't define you. Love, trust, and respect are earned. And when those things are absent, all you have left is biology. I walked back into that room not just as a wife, but as someone who had finally chosen herself, not in anger, but in clarity. And while I knew that not everyone would understand that choice, I also knew this. I could live with their misunderstanding, because for the first time, I was finally living with truth.